All right, let's jump into this deep dive. You sent some seriously heavy stuff about apartheid-era South Africa. Really makes you think.
Definitely not light reading material.
We've got apartheid's cultural strategy, something on this banned film, Joe Bullitt. Then there's the book, Education for Barbarism. Oh, and the Black Authorities Act of 1951.
Yeah, lots to unpack there.
It seems like we're going beyond just the laws, the segregation, and into how apartheid messed with people's minds, their whole culture.
Absolutely, you've nailed it.
Yeah.
And apartheid's cultural strategy, that's where it all starts.
It's scary how direct it is.
It's like a plan, right, to engineer a whole society.
Exactly, a blueprint.
Just thinking about it is wild. They didn't just control where people lived, what jobs they could have, but like how they thought, what they could even dream of.
That's the point. And this source, it's obsessed with limiting what they call unhealthy white-collar ideals.
Unhealthy, what's that even mean? What was so bad about Black South Africans wanting professional careers? Well, put yourself in the apartheid regime's shoes for a second. Any ambition outside the little boxes they made for non-white people, that was a problem, like a direct threat to their whole ideology.
So they had to keep Black South Africans feeling, believing they were lower.
Exactly, subservient. It was about maintaining that power structure.
It wasn't just money then. It was power, pure and simple.
Absolutely. Control. And that's where Joe Bullitt comes in. This film, with its black detective, successful, living in a modern, integrated world.
It challenged that whole subservient narrative.
Head on.
Crazy that a film could be seen as that dangerous.
Yeah.
But Joe Bullitt was banned, right? Because it showed a black man making it, living what they saw as the European way of life.
You got it. A black man having a future that apartheid didn't dictate, that was a nightmare to them. Banning it was damage control, trying to keep those ideas out of people's heads.
It's like they were building a fence, but in people's minds. Just as real as the one separating communities.
Yeah, you can see that.
And this whole controlling aspirations thing through education, that's the core of education for barbarism, isn't it?
You're right there. And that title, pretty bold, huh?
Barbarism does seem extreme.
Yeah, it does. But the author builds a case. You can't deny that.
They're saying that Bantu Education, the system made just for Black South Africans, was intentionally bad.
Right. Not separate, but equal, but a totally different, messed up kind of education.
What really hit you about it?
The comparison to how Nazi Germany did education, it might seem over the top to some.
You compare those two.
Yeah, but they were both about controlling what people thought, molding them into a certain type, the kind that wouldn't cause trouble for the people in charge.
A self-fulfilling prophecy, almost.
Right.
Teach people they're only good for certain jobs, and they won't challenge the system keeping them down.
That's the idea. And Education for Barbarism takes it further. It wasn't just theory. Bantu Education. Rejected by the people it was, FOR. Protests, boycotts, people making their own schools. They saw it for what it was, a tool to keep them down.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the strategy laid out in apartheid's cultural strategy. We see it play out with Joe Bullitt getting banned and then put into action through the schools. But how did they make this happen in everyday life? Isn't that where the Black Authorities Act fits in?
Right on. That's the missing piece. The Black Authorities Act of 1951, that's how they made apartheid reach into every corner of Black South Africans' lives. It set up this whole system of government-appointed chiefs, basically giving them power over their communities.
And these chiefs, if I'm reading this right, they could make rules about, like, everything. The material, moral, and social well-being of Black South Africans. That's a lot of power,
Right.
especially since those people didn't even choose them.
No kidding. You got to remember, these chiefs were appointed by the government, could be removed by them too. It was indirect rule, basically.
So the apartheid regime got what they wanted done, but through these local guys.
Precisely.
So it wasn't just thought control, it was controlling their daily life. A system built on the whole messed up apartheid worldview.
Exactly that. And when you connect it back to what we talked about earlier, you see how it all fits together like a puzzle, a really nasty puzzle.
A pretty horrifying picture, to be honest. A whole government built around controlling not just what people did, but what they thought. I mean, that's just messed up.
Yeah, no argument there. It makes you think about how many ways there are to oppress people. Sometimes the worst ones are the ones that get inside your head.
This has been really insightful. But this is heavy stuff, no doubt. Could we maybe dig a little deeper into Joe Bullitt for a minute? It feels like such a powerful example of how far they'd go to control what people saw, what they believed.
Joe Bullitt. Yeah, let's do it. It's like a window into their anxieties about Black people actually achieving something and how they'd try to crush anything that challenged their whole ideology.
What gets me is that this film, it was made in '73, right? well into apartheid. It shows, even after decades of this system, there were still people fighting back, making art that pushed the boundaries.
Absolutely. And the fact that they had to ban it shows how much it scared them.
So let's back up a sec. For anyone listening who maybe doesn't know Joe Bullitt, can you give us the quick version? What's it about, and why was it so dangerous to them?
Sure. Joe Bullitt, it's a crime thriller, modern setting. The main character, Joe Bullitt, he's this black detective solving a kidnapping case. And the film shows him as smart, capable, good at his job.
Which, in apartheid South Africa, was a revolutionary idea in itself.
Totally. A black man in a position of authority, solving crimes, in a system designed to keep him down. That was unacceptable to them.
Like it was contagious or something. Seeing a black man succeeding in a so-called white profession.
Would give other black South Africans ideas. That's exactly what they were afraid of. They'd start questioning their place, demanding more.
And then bam, those unhealthy white-collar ideals come back to haunt us. They saw the film as promoting ambition, the wrong kind of ambition.
You got it. The kind that could bring the whole system crashing down.
It's wild that a film could be seen as that powerful, as that much of a threat.
It's the power of art, right? Art can challenge things, show you a different way to see the world. It can inspire people, make them believe they can change things. And that's why regimes like apartheid, they have to control it, crush it. Art is dangerous to them.
In the case of Joe Bullitt, they weren't just censoring a film, they were trying to kill a whole vision of the future.
A vision they couldn't handle. They were terrified of black South Africans dreaming bigger, wanting more than what they were allowed.
A stark reminder of how far these regimes will go.
Yeah.
Control the narrative, control the people.
Exactly. And it reminds us why we have to fight for freedom of expression, for everyone's voice to be heard.
Makes you think, what other stories got buried during apartheid? What voices were silenced? What futures were we robbed of because they threatened the way things were?
Those are the questions that stay with you.
Okay, so we talked about how banning Joe Bullitt was controlling the narrative. But education for barbarism goes deeper, right? Controlling how people think.
Way deeper. Banning a film, that's reacting. Education, that's shaping minds from the start.
And in apartheid, it was about making sure black South Africans didn't develop intellectually. That's just horrifying.
It's chilling, no doubt. The book argues Bantu education was meant to churn out a workforce that wouldn't make waves. Obedient, limited.
I remember that bit about using tribal languages in Bantu education, not just about preserving culture, was it?
No way. It fed right into that apartheid's cultural strategy we talked about. Keep them divided, make it harder for them to unite.
Divide and conquer. A classic move.
And then the Black Authorities Act reinforced that, those tribal leaders. They made sure people stayed in line.
So you couldn't challenge the system. Not really. Not when it was coming at you from all sides.
Exactly. You combine that with education that keeps you narrow-minded, a recipe for control.
It's like
Right.
it's all connected. This web of oppression woven so tight.
A puzzle. A truly terrible puzzle with pieces designed to keep people trapped.
And the impact, well, it's still felt today, isn't it?
No question about it. We've only scratched the surface here.
Let's take a moment to, let's think about this. It's a lot to absorb. Bantu education, it wasn't just about schools. It was about shaping a whole way of thinking.
It's true.
And then you layer on the Black Authorities Act. It makes you wonder how much of this we're still dealing with. How much of this is still part of South Africa today?
Those are the questions we need to be asking.
Yeah, big questions.
Yeah.
But before we go too far down that road, let's come back to the sources. We talked a lot about education for barbarism.
Yeah.
What about the Black Authorities Act? It feels like a key part of how apartheid actually worked day to day.
Absolutely. It's like, at first glance, it's just boring government stuff.
Right.
But when you look closer...
How they control people's lives.
Exactly. Don't forget, these chiefs, they had the power to make and enforce rules about, well, practically everything. And they didn't answer to the people, they answered to the apartheid government.
So it was like a way to sidestep democracy completely. Just impose their will.
That's it. And they kept changing the act over the years, too. Each change gave those chiefs more power and took more rights from black South Africans.
It was a constant tightening of the screws.
Exactly. You got to see that evolution to understand how messed up it was. There was a big change in '59, the Promotion of Black Self-Government Act, they called it. That's when they started making those homelands, those Bantustans, supposedly self-governing areas for different black ethnic groups.
But they weren't self-governing at all, were they? Just dumping grounds for black people they didn't want around.
Right. Packed, poor, no infrastructure. The goal was to keep black people separate, unequal. And the Black Authorities Act, it was key to making that happen.
So it's bigger than just local government. It's tied into that whole apartheid project,
Yeah.
taking away land, taking away power.
Absolutely. And its impact on millions of Black South Africans, it's still felt today.
It's easy to think of apartheid as this big abstract thing, but when you look at something like the Black Authorities Act,
It gets real, doesn't it?
it shows you how it worked in people's everyday lives.
And that's crucial to remember. Behind all those laws, policies, grand plans, there are real people who are hurt by this system.
It's not just dates and events. It's about the people who live through them.
And those stories, they're not simple. Tragedy and resilience, all mixed up.
We've covered a lot today, but we've only scratched the surface, really. There's so much more to explore about this period.
Agreed. But these sources, they give us a solid place to start.
So for someone listening, where should they go from here? What would you recommend if they want to learn more?
If you're interested in the Black Authorities Act specifically, I'd say find the stories of the people who lived under it. Those firsthand accounts, they're powerful. They show you what it was like to live under that law.
And for understanding the bigger picture, the whole apartheid thing.
Oh, there's tons of stuff out there. Books, documentaries, websites. You could start with some classic South African writing. Nelson Mandela's autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, or Alan Paton's Cry, The Beloved Country. Those will give you a feel for the human cost of apartheid, the fight for freedom.
Great suggestions. Those are going on my list.
And don't forget about films. There are some amazing ones about apartheid, made by South Africans and people all over the world.
Serafina
Yeah.
gets me every time. It's a musical, but it really captures the student uprisings.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. Cry Freedom, A Dry White Season, Invictus, they all show different sides of apartheid, but they all have that same theme. The fight for dignity, for justice.
Even in those dark times, people found ways to resist, to create, to fight for something better.
Exactly. It shows you the human spirit, and it reminds us that the fight for justice, it never ends. There's still so much wrong in the world. It's on us to keep resisting, to keep pushing for change.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive, really insightful conversation.
My pleasure, really.
And to you, our listener, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this has sparked something in you, made you want to learn more. Keep asking questions, keep digging deeper.
That's what it's all about.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
See you next time.